Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Lee and I'm a psychologist at the Child Mind Institute. We hope that by now you know we're a national nonprofit that supports children and families with gold standard mental health care, advice and resources, all online and accessible to everyone. You can learn more about the resources we have available for families during the coronavirus, including telehealth evaluations and treatment, by visiting childmind.org/coronavirus. Today, I'd like to talk about ADHD and managing behavior for children with ADHD and answer your questions about that and anything else that you're wondering about. Post your questions in the feed and we'll post some links to some helpful resources on childmind.org and the details about the next Facebook Live. Remember, we're here every day at 10 a.m. and 4:30, and we look through your questions daily so that we can update our resources and make sure that we're meeting your needs very specifically. Great. So in terms of kind of getting started, we're going to take a look at some of the questions. And thanks for joining us. It looks like we have a question actually that came in a little bit earlier about ADHD. My child has ADHD and isn't great at concentrating at the best of times. She still has to do her schoolwork, but with everyone at home, and we live in a little apartment, she's really struggling to concentrate. What can we do? So first, I want to just validate your experience of this and really kind of praise you for throwing this question out there. We really appreciate it. I also want to let you know that you're not alone. So children with ADHD, just like typically developing kids, might have difficulty concentrating. We know children with ADHD have particular difficulty organizing themselves and focusing and they might even become hyper-focused on other things when we don't want them to. So I do have a couple thoughts and strategies for you. I think the very first is to actually work with your daughter to some degree around creating an environment for her that is a little bit more free of distractions. And this might need to be, you guys might need to be creative about this. So this might mean instead of setting up a chair where she has to sit, it might be about kind of creating a box with some tape that you put down on the floor to show her that the area she needs to be in to complete her work, right? We might also think about things like headphones or noise-canceling headphones to kind of help to decrease auditory distractions, thinking about closing rooms, or even setting up folders or mats or pads to kind of make a barrier so that other things that might be distracting to her are not quite as accessible. And while again, we might need to be creative about this, we might also be able to make this a fun thing that your child gets to do before or after they're done with their work to kind of set this space up, right? So I would definitely think a little bit about some environmental factors, right? And then also doing a really good job of using praise and attention when your child is engaged and they are concentrating. So I think I've talked a little bit about this in previous Facebook Lives, and I think this is also an important point for parents to continue to keep in mind, is that kids really want their attention big, bold, and immediate. They care a little bit less about whether it's positive or negative. People, not just kids, so if you're struggling with a spouse at home who's maybe having these difficulties as well, people want their attention big, bold, and immediate. So what we want to try to do is when your child is engaged in the environment that they are, concentrating, or actually maybe even ignoring a distraction that previously might have gotten them off track, that we make a big deal out of that with our attention. We use praise, labeled praise, specific praise, telling the child exactly what it was we liked about their behavior to make it a big deal. Great job paying attention and getting started right away. Or I love the way that when your little sister was doing her dance class over here, you still did such a great job of completing your math homework. So making a big deal out of those things and really making sure the child feels acknowledged for their ability to concentrate, knowing that it can be hard, right? We have another question coming in that I think has been coming up a lot for kids and families, which is, how do we handle a child with anger issues who's now home all of the time, right? And so what we know is, a lot of parents, a lot of caregivers are struggling with that particular factor right now. And what we want to try to think a little bit about is, what are the types of triggers or things that do result in your child feeling angry or engaging in anger outbursts? And is there maybe some ways that we can manipulate or modify some of the environment or some of the situations right now to avoid some of those anger outbursts? Not forever, but for the time being, right? We also want to think about ways to acknowledge your child in the absence of these angry outbursts, even if it's just for a small period of time. So if your child wakes up and they don't engage in an angry outburst right away, or when they first wake up, they give you a pleasant sign, or even just a neutral statement, make a big deal out of it. Wow, thanks for saying something so positive when you first got up, or I love the way that you, even though it's frustrating that we can't go outside first thing today, you handled it so well, right? So again, using that labeled praise, that big, bold, and immediate attention to highlight for kids the absence of these problem behaviors, making a big deal out of it. Also making sure that as parents who are really, really struggling right now, and rightfully so, that you're also not inadvertently maybe modeling these types of angry responses, which can be so hard, right? And no judgment here. These are trying times, and parents deserve just as much empathy as the kids do, right? And so making sure that you're taking a little bit of time in your day to fill up your own energy, to fill up your own self-care bucket a little bit, so that you might be a little bit more available when you need to be to keep your cool, to model patience, to model the absence of these angry responses. Great question. Thanks for throwing that out there and admitting those things, right? That I know a lot of parents are experiencing that, and that can feel very validating to them right now. Okay, another question that we have coming in related to ADHD here is, should my daughter stay on her ADHD medication? It's just the three of us at home, much quieter than her environment at school. Does she need it? This is a fabulous question, and one that I've actually been hearing a lot from parents and caregivers across the last couple weeks. And the answer to this is a little bit more complicated, and one where I get to do a little bit of pushing it off, at least at first. My first initial answer is that this is absolutely something that you need to talk about with your prescribing physician, right? So making sure that you get in contact with either the pediatrician, the psychopharmacologist, the psychiatrist, developmental pediatrician, whoever it is that's prescribing that medication, to share with them a little information about kind of where you are and to really kind of talk through your questions and concerns. Medication should just not be ended arbitrarily. It always should be done in collaboration and conjunction with talking to your mental health professional. So that's a great question, and there's probably a lot of different answers, but the main thing is that you're checking in with the authority on that so that they can help you, not just with any side effects or anything that you want to be on the lookout for if you're starting or stopping medication, but also that they might be able to work with you around a little bit of a monitoring system to help you develop an idea for how useful that medication is during this unique or unprecedented times, right? Great question. All right, we have another question here from, oh, this one, my heart goes out to you. This is a single mom with ADHD trying to care for her son who also has ADHD. We're both struggling to stay above water. Do you have any tips for parents with ADHD as well? Well, I absolutely have tips for parents who have ADHD, and what we know is that very often kids who have attentional difficulty similar challenges. And the very first thing that I would suggest to parents in this situation is to check in about the big three. And the big three are sleep, diet, and activity, right? So what we know is that when those three things are in calibration, when those three things are in a better balance, oftentimes that will improve and help concentration, attention, and will help you to develop the energy and the kind of wherewithal that you need to implement some of these other suggestions that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. But checking in with your kids about those big three is really important. Checking in yourself about those big three is increasingly important, because what we know about managing kids is that we have to manage ourselves first, and we do have to kind of make sure that we're taking care of ourselves first. What we talk about in terms of kind of when you're on the airplane, right? And they say put the mask on yourself first before you put the mask on the person next to you, right? That's what we need to do in this situation as well. You're only going to be able to be the captain of the ship that is your home if you're at your best. And so absolutely checking in about sleep, activity, and diet. And then looking to see if you can establish a new routine or a new structure for your activities throughout the day. So really sitting down in an organized way, possibly once your child has gone to sleep, and thinking, what are my priorities in the day? Knowing that the priorities might need to be a little bit less or a little bit less demanding than they were previously. And knowing that those priorities are the main things you're going to hit through the day. And if you get to those, you're going to count it as a win. You're going to schedule those things also in a way that is a preferred activity for your child or for you is coming after a less preferred activity. So if you know that it's hard for you to sit down and get your child to focus on their math work for a while, make sure that the thing you schedule for yourself immediately following is preferred or is a fun activity that the two of you get to do together, right? That would be something that I would recommend, keeping that structure and checking in about those big three. Great question. Thanks for your vulnerability and your willingness to share, again, in ways that we know are impacting a lot of caregivers right now. All right, we have another question here coming on. My hyperactive son is literally bouncing off the walls. We're under a shelter-in-place order, and he can't go to any of his usual activities. He plays a ton of sports, and it's making all of us crazy. What can we do? Well, my first suggestion is to call an adoption agency. No, I'm just kidding. Absolutely, we got to work with kids in the situation that we're in right now, right? And while we know that some kids appreciate and enjoy activity a lot more than others, we do need to kind of meet kids where they're at, right? And so one thing we might want to look into doing is creating opportunities that are safe within the household that generate or allow your child to get some of that activity out. So there are a number of free dance classes online, a number of free fitness classes online. There's Go Noodle movement breaks, all different ways I think that you can access some of these fun things online to keep your child's activity rate up. Even just creating your own maybe activity challenges in the day, 10 jumping jacks, 10 sit-ups, and 10 push-ups, right? You might want to also incorporate some, videotaping there. I know that there's a lot of Instagram challenges going back and forth right now. I was a part of one myself in terms of push-up challenge, right? And so maybe working with your child to, send a video to a friend who also does those activities. So we're adding in a social component to that activity and making it a little bit more exciting and intense. Thinking about maybe creating a scavenger hunt within your house that your child can kind of engage in and get some of their energy out in. I know there was a TV show years ago called Minute to Win It, and the whole point of that game show was all of the competitions in that game show were related to things that you could build within household items. So maybe thinking about some of those creative games that are safe, again, within the confines of your home, but might add a little novelty, a little bit more excitement, a little bit more intensity, a little bit more input into those activities for kids. Great question. I think also thinking about some board games or some other types of competition that might be appropriate to incorporate in, again, joining your child around maybe some games that they like to play. That some of them might be online, some of them might be, again, a little bit more active. Maybe even challenging your child to see who can do the most number of sit-ups in the day in phases or something like that. Maybe your child runs a fitness class for you. That could be really fun, right? And gives them a nice opportunity to be in the lead and to get some of that energy out. See if you can keep up, right? Maybe get the siblings involved so that they're getting some of their energy out as well. Maybe your child runs a fitness class for some of their friends or their peers, right? So these are all different ways that we might be able to encourage some of that activity, but in a more appropriate way. Great question. All right, another question that we have here is related to my child has melatonin for sleep, lack of exercise really hitting us, sleep being lost. Any ideas how to manage at home? That's an excellent question, and we do know that families are in a situation right now where the lack of exercise or the lack of activity or the change in their routine is impacting their sleep greatly. And so what I might suggest at first to parents is even just start with a little bit of data collection, just jotting down maybe initially what time your child is falling asleep at night and what time they're waking up. It's important, especially during this time and these unusual times, that we're keeping track of any makeup sleep kids might be getting or any naps they might be sneaking during the day to make sure that that's also not influencing how motivated they are to fall asleep at night. In relation to melatonin, although it is over the counter, you also do want to be checking in with a pediatrician, psychopharmacologist, developmental pediatrician to help you to navigate the dosage or kind of the next best steps with melatonin to keep those things as consistent as you can for your child. We also know that there is some anxiety or just even a little bit of rumination or leftover worries that kids or adults might be experiencing in relation to going to bed at night. And so thinking about some calming activities or developing a new bedtime routine that helps everybody to think about pleasant thoughts. I've often, and actually just got done completing a session with a family today where we actually created a dream map. And that is actually just a visual depiction of fun and exciting things that the child can think about before they're falling asleep. And the visual aspect of the dream map may be kind of posted in a place that the child can see it right before bed, possibly in a place where your child can see it if they wake in the middle of the night. All these exciting things that they have to look forward to or get hyper-focused on in a positive way, which might improve just kind of the tone and the way that we're feeling before we head to bed. Great question. Okay, so we have a question about a slightly older kid here. I have a teenager with ADHD or ADD inattentive type. How assignments on different platforms, it is so confusing for her. You are not alone in this, and I really appreciate this question, and it's one that I've been talking with parents quite a bit about across the last couple weeks. And parents and caregivers have actually relayed to me in some way, wow, I didn't even know how challenging it might have been for my child or teenager prior to this to manage and organize all these different forums and all of these different platforms. First, I want to make sure that you know and understand that kids, again, even with ADHD, are incredibly resilient and are actually navigating a lot of these things in other ways. We know that kids are navigating multiple platforms across Snapchat, across Instagram, across Facebook, right? So we know kids have that capacity. We also need to make sure that they're motivated to check all of those things, right? We know the reason that a kid checks Snapchat, checks Facebook, and then checks Instagram is because they have something cool that they want to see on there, or they have something cool that they want to say on there, right? And so what we might want to look at doing is initially helping your teenager to figure out what are the places I need to be looking every day, or if I don't need to be looking at them every day, how often platforms, and inserting some motivation for your teenager to actually do that, right? So inserting motivation that isn't necessarily based on their performance or the completion of assignments, just rewards and motivation that's designed to help them to figure out where those things live at first, knowing that we may need to use some of that momentum across to increase their ability to hand in those assignments consistently. But for right now, we may count it again as a win if they just check those different platforms and tell you, yes or no, I do have assignments there. So we want to make sure that we're chunking or kind of putting things into smaller building blocks and then slowly but surely putting all those chunks together to get closer to our long-term goals. But right now, it's going to be very important for us to start with short-term goals, meeting, child or teenager where they're at, and then building them up from there. Great question. Can be very, very confusing. I'm struggling myself with Google Docs, Zoom, Google Classroom, all of these different things. Helping parents navigate that can be very challenging. And as I said, we want to validate our child's and teenagers' experience of those things as well. Just going to take a quick drink here, guys. Hopefully you're not hearing the construction in the background. It just ended, I think, just a couple minutes ago. I'm working from home, doing my best. I'm sure a lot of you parents can relate to that, right? You're watching Facebook Live here at the Child Mind Institute, where we're taking all your questions and trying to help you to get your needs met in relation to these uncertain and unusual times. So another question that we have coming in here is, how can I get my kids to get dressed in the morning before school starts? Is that something I shouldn't be so demanding about? Ooh, good question. Good question. And I am going to, full disclosure, I am dressed from the half down today. Like, I am dressed halfway today, but I am definitely wearing some pajama pants. So I was able to do most of my work day in a top there. But the reason I bring that up, folks, is because it is all about prioritizing and deciding how many battles in the day you're going to get into with your child. If this is not the main battle, getting dressed, then I don't know that I would pick that battle every day. I might pick the battle of getting that child to the computer, getting them to the learning environment, getting those assignments in, or maybe the battle of getting them to brush their teeth or complete the hygiene activities that they needed to that day, showering, teeth brushing, that type of thing. However, if you're not having a lot of battles, then absolutely I think that should be a priority and something that you do as a part of your regular routine to stay in your structure and as a part of kind of what your typical day-to-day, right? We also want to think about getting dressed in, again, those chunking sections, right? So if your child is having some difficulty with socks and pants and shirt, maybe you help them with a couple of those things, but you require them to put their shirt on every morning, right? So again, it's thinking about kind of where are we at with some of this, and how can we move our children along in this progression, knowing that we also may be in this unusual situation for quite some time, and that we probably have some time to build on these goals, again, in a long-term way. Great question. All right. Another question that we have here is about, again, this is a parent who's struggling. How can I keep my 2 ADHD kids on track? None of us are very organized and everything feels very chaotic. It's a really great question, and I have a lot of empathy for parents who are managing not just one child with special needs, but the possibility of multiple children who have, differing needs or the same needs in an intense way. I think what we want to try to make sure that we're doing when we're thinking about managing siblings or, again, 2 children that might have these special needs is, again, what are your main priorities in the day, and how can you structure the day in a way where those main priorities do get accomplished? It may even be the type of thing where you need to get creative and decide, okay, odd days, I'm going to make sure that the work for one of my children gets done, and on even days, I'm going to focus on the other. Just allowing you to prioritize in a slightly different way. That doesn't mean that we might not require the children to do work both days, but your focus and your priority might need to be on one solely for that moment so that you can accomplish a goal. And so that your children also feel like you're accomplishing something and not having them feel too overwhelmed by the goals of the day. right? So these are things that we want to try to make sure, again, that we're meeting those kids where they're at and bringing them along. I'd say too, if you have two children with ADHD, it's important to be kind to yourself and manage your own expectation for what truly is going to be accomplished in the day. Knowing that it can be incredibly difficult to get two children with ADHD up and out and into their clothes. That is a win. And so while parents are probably being a little bit hard on themselves during these times, and what I can tell from these questions is parents are highlighting the areas where they think they're maybe not meeting the mark. It's also incredibly important for parents to remember and keep track of the wins and the successes they're having each day as well. So something that we do in a weekly meeting, a weekly staff meeting, is our wows of the week, or our WOWs, our wows, where we praise each other, labeled praise each other, so that we can acknowledge the great things that we've done across that week. Parents and kids really incorporating a wows of the day even, or a wows of the week in a regular and consistent way could be a great way of acknowledging your kids' good behavior, but also acknowledging your spouse or your partners or other caregivers' wins and successes as well. And if that doesn't feel like something you can do in a full family way, maybe you just slowly but surely keep your own brag book and start writing down your own brags. I did get both my kids showered today. I didn't kill them, and that's a win today, and that's what we're counting as the win, right? So making sure, again, that we're being kind to ourselves and acknowledging the good things that we're doing for kids just as much as, if not more, than the way that we're maybe being harsh with ourselves about, meeting the expectation in these very stressful times. So it looks like the questions are slowing down just a little bit, and we only have just another minute or two. So I'm just going to thank you all so much for attending today and listening. As I said, I want to thank you all for joining me, and I hope that this was helpful. Remember, we're here every day at 10 a.m. and at 4:30, and we're looking through your questions daily. Check the post for the topic for our next Facebook Live. As we've said before, and we hope you'll continue to keep in mind, the Child Mind Institute is here to help with mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, no matter where you are. We have resources to help, from daily tips to consultations to gold standard telehealth treatments. So please, please, please go to childmind.org/coronavirus. Be safe, be well, and thank you so much.